A beggar girl tames an untamed horse. What happens next is heartbreaking. Nina, a young girl of about 12, sits quietly on the worn-out pavement of a busy street corner, her small frame hunched against the cold wind. Her eyes are tired, reflecting years of hardship despite her young age. Her clothes are ragged, her shoes barely holding together. She has learned to survive by collecting scraps of food and begging for alms from those who walk by, though most of them ignore her. Her face is smudged with dirt, and her unkempt hair blows in the wind, but there's a quiet strength in her posture, as though she has seen it all and yet refuses to give up. She holds out her hand, waiting for the usual coins or a piece of bread from a passerby. Her stomach growls, but Nina doesn't complain. She's used to hunger. She's used to being ignored. But today, something is different. There's a flicker of determination in her eyes, something that wasn't there yesterday. Perhaps it's the memory of a dream she had, where she was no longer a beggar, where she was free. The thought of that dream makes her hold her head up just a little higher as she waits, hoping for something more than just a coin. Nina has lived through the worst of days. Sleepless nights on the cold streets, being shoved aside by busy people who never stop to notice her. But she continues, always hoping that somehow, things will change. Her story is one of silent suffering but also of resilience. She knows that survival on the streets is hard, and it's easy to feel invisible, forgotten by the world. Yet, there's a spark of hope in her heart that refuses to die. Nina may be poor, alone, and struggling, but she hasn't lost the belief that something better is out there. Something more than just surviving. One day, as Nina sits on her usual corner, a noise catches her attention. A thundering of hooves, the sound of something powerful and wild. She looks up to see a wild horse, its mane flowing freely in the wind, galloping across an open field just beyond the city's edge. The horse moves with grace and strength, running without hesitation, as if it owns the land. His body is sleek, muscular, and unbroken. His spirit is evident in every movement. The horse, named Storm, is the embodiment of freedom. As Nina watches from a distance, a strange feeling wells up inside her. She has seen horses before, but none like him. He is untamed, unchained by anything. Nina can't help but feel a deep longing as she watches him. His freedom stands in stark contrast to her own life, one where every day is spent in struggle, begging for just enough to survive. For a moment, she forgets the harshness of her reality and loses herself in the sight of the horse. She imagines what it would be like to live like him, to be free from the suffocating grip of her circumstances, to run through the fields without a care in the world. The image of Storm becomes a symbol of everything she wishes for: freedom, strength, and a life where she can simply be herself. Storm's untamed spirit speaks to her, almost as if he understands her pain. There's something in his eyes, a wildness that matches the hunger in her heart. She wonders if this is what she's been searching for all her life. Storm doesn't need anyone. He's not bound by rules, expectations, or the harshness of the world. He is truly free. As she watches him disappear into the distance, Nina feels a sense of loss but also a sense of hope. She knows that, in some way, their lives are connected. Both are trapped in a world that doesn't care for them, yet both are somehow still holding on. The sight of Storm brings a quiet sense of peace to her heart, even as it reminds her of everything she lacks. But for the first time, she doesn't feel completely alone. The next day, Nina's curiosity and longing for freedom lead her back to the field where she saw Storm running the day before. She doesn't know why, but something inside her tells her to go to him. As she approaches the edge of the field, she spots him again, grazing peacefully near a small hill. There's a sense of peace around him that Nina hasn't felt in a long time, and for a brief moment, she wonders if he can feel the same peace she does, just by being close to him. Nina approaches slowly, each step careful and measured, as if she's walking into the unknown. She doesn't make any sudden movements, unsure how the horse will react. She doesn't have a plan, just an overwhelming desire to connect with him. She looks at the ground, as if trying to make herself less intimidating to the wild creature. Her heart races with a mix of excitement and fear, but her desire to reach out to this animal outweighs her hesitation. As she gets closer, Nina speaks softly to the horse. Her voice trembles slightly at first, but she keeps talking. "Hey there, Storm. I won't hurt you. I just want to be near you." She says these words, not expecting anything, but hoping for something. She offers him a small piece of bread she's saved, her only food for the day, and gently holds it out in front of her, palm open. The gesture is one of vulnerability. It's all she can offer, and she hopes it's enough. Storm lifts his head, his sharp, wild eyes studying her from a distance. He doesn't approach the bread right away. Instead, he snorts loudly and takes a few steps back, ears flicking in alarm. Nina doesn't flinch. She simply lowers her hand and takes a step back, giving him space, but keeping her gaze soft and non-threatening. She knows she can't force him to come to her. If anything, that would only push him further away. So she waits. Every muscle in her body is tense with anticipation, but she doesn't show it. This is her first attempt, and she won't give up just yet. Nina's patience is tested over the next few days. She continues visiting the field, showing up at the same time every day. Every encounter is a mix of small steps forward and giant leaps backward. Some days, Storm barely acknowledges her presence, running off at the sight of her. Other days, he seems to linger, watching her from afar, just out of reach. Nina's heart sinks each time he runs away, but she doesn't let it stop her. She knows this is not something that can be rushed. The wildness in Storm is not something to be broken with force, but something to be earned, little by little. She begins learning his patterns, when he grazes, when he runs, when he rests. Every small observation is a clue, and Nina starts to build trust with him, even if it's just a little at a time. Each day she brings him food, offering him a mix of carrots and apples. Sometimes he accepts, sometimes he doesn't. But Nina doesn't give up. Every time she gets a little closer, even if it's just by a few inches, it feels like a victory. There are moments where Nina gets frustrated, where the hours feel wasted and the connection feels impossible. She's just a girl and he's a wild horse. They come from completely different worlds. He has his freedom, his power, and his instinct to be untamed, while she has nothing but hope and determination. But Nina keeps going. She knows that if she's patient enough, the horse will begin to trust her. He just needs to see that she's not like everyone else who has ever tried to tame him. The bond between Nina and Storm isn't just built through actions, but through the unspoken understanding that grows between them. The imagery during these moments can reflect the subtle transformation happening within them both. Nina's bare feet, caked in the dirt of the ground, symbolize her grounding in hardship and resilience. Each step she takes toward Storm is a small victory over her own fears and insecurities. Her feet are sore, and the roughness of the ground mirrors the struggles she's been through in her life. The dirt on her skin tells a story of a girl who has lived through pain and continues to walk forward despite it. Storm's wild eyes are a mirror to Nina's own longing. They are fierce and untamed, filled with mistrust but also with a sense of curiosity. Every time he glances at her, it's as if he's trying to understand her. His eyes are windows to his soul, showing his internal battle, the desire for freedom battling with the slow realization that Nina might not be like the others. He tests her resolve, pushing her to prove that she is worthy of his trust. The contrast between Nina's tattered clothes and Storm's wild, unbroken mane represents their shared fight against the world that seeks to bind them. Both are struggling for something more: freedom, respect, and love. They are both in need of healing. As Nina continues to approach him, inch by inch, their parallel journeys toward connection unfold in subtle, yet powerful ways. The scene captures not only the growth of their bond, but the silent understanding that this is the beginning of something deeper than either of them expected. As the days turn into weeks, Nina begins to notice the subtle shifts in Storm's behavior. The more she approaches him with kindness and patience, the less he pulls away. At first, the horse's movements were sharp and defensive whenever she neared, but now there's a slight hesitation. He doesn't bolt immediately. Instead, he stays in place, observing her quietly from a distance. One day, as Nina walks toward Storm, She calls his name softly. Storm, it's me. I'm here again. She holds out an apple to him, her fingers trembling slightly, not in fear but in anticipation. The horse looks at her, then at the apple, then back at her. For a long moment, nothing happens. Nina can feel her heart pounding in her chest, but she keeps her hands steady, her eyes filled with hope. And then it happens. Slowly, cautiously, Storm takes a step forward, his nose brushing against the apple. He sniffs it, his soft breath warm against her palm. For a second, time seems to stand still. Nina's breath catches, a small victory unfolding right in front of her. She smiles, the first real smile she's had in weeks, as Storm nibbles the fruit from her hand. This simple act, the trust he's showing her, is a turning point. It's more than just feeding him. It's a sign that their bond is beginning to form. Each day, Nina continues to visit him, offering food and speaking to him in soft tones. Gradually, Storm begins to allow her closer. Sometimes, he even lets her touch his mane for a brief moment before pulling away. But each time it's a little longer, a little softer. Nina's heart swells with pride as she realizes that the wild horse she once feared is slowly opening up to her. The transformation happening between Nina and Storm is not just physical but emotional. As Nina witnesses Storm's progress, she begins to notice changes within herself as well. The girl who once struggled to survive on the streets is beginning to see herself in a new light. She is capable, resilient, and strong. She feels the weight of her past hardships begin to lift, replaced by a new sense of self-worth that she hasn't known before. Nina no longer feels as invisible as she once did. As Storm starts to trust her, she realizes that maybe, just maybe, she can trust herself too. She's not the hopeless girl she once was. Each time Storm responds to her kindness, it reaffirms her belief that there is more to her life than just survival. There is purpose, and she is worthy of love and connection. Storm, too, is growing. The wild, untamed animal that once bolted at the slightest movement is becoming calmer. He no longer sees Nina as a threat, but as a companion. The walls he built around himself are slowly coming down. Each moment they share, whether it's a quiet, gentle touch or a shared meal, deepens their bond. Storm's resistance fades, replaced by the tentative trust of an animal who has learned to let someone in, even if it's only a little at a time. Their growth is not just about building trust with each other. It's also about healing from the scars of their pasts. For Nina, the horse represents freedom, a life without the chains of poverty and hardship. For Storm, Nina offers something just as valuable: the chance to be cared for, not as a wild beast, but as a living being worthy of respect and tenderness. Together, they are finding strength in each other, and through this, they both start to shed the weight of their pasts. As the bond between Nina and Storm deepens, so does their emotional connection. The days are no longer just about feeding and training. They are about understanding, listening, and healing. One afternoon, after a particularly difficult day where Nina has faced rejection and harsh treatment from others on the streets, she finds herself at Storm's side. The wind is still and the air is warm. She sits on the ground, her back against a tree, watching Storm graze peacefully nearby. In a soft voice, Nina begins to speak. You know, sometimes it feels like everything is against me, like no one cares. But then I come here and I see you, and it's like, I'm not so alone anymore. Her words are quiet, but there is a rawness in them, a vulnerability she's never shared with anyone before. She looks at Storm, her eyes filled with unspoken emotion. I don't know what will happen, but I hope we can both be free. I hope we can find peace. Storm pauses, looking up at her with his deep, knowing eyes. For a moment, they simply stare at each other, as if communicating without words. There's an understanding between them now, a bond formed not just through actions, but through shared experiences of pain, loneliness, and survival. In that moment, Nina feels the weight of her struggles ease, even if just for a while. Storm's presence brings her comfort, as if he understands the depth of her words, even though he cannot speak them. The emotional connection between them is palpable. It's not just about what Nina does for Storm, but also about what Storm provides for her in return. He becomes her refuge, a source of strength in her otherwise harsh world. And in return, she gives him something just as valuable: her trust, her compassion, and her unwavering belief that he is more than just a wild horse. He is a being worthy of love, just as she is. One bright, crisp morning, Nina arrives at her usual spot to meet Storm, only to find something terrifying waiting for her. A group of men on horseback, rough and unkind in their demeanor, have cornered Storm. They've already set up a makeshift pen to trap him, and Nina watches in horror from behind a nearby tree. She can hear the sounds of hooves pounding the earth, the horses snorting in agitation. The traders' voices are loud and gruff, discussing their plans to sell the wild horse to the highest bidder. Nina's heart sinks. She knows what's happening. These men are horse traders, and they have no intention of treating Storm with the kindness he deserves. They see him only as a commodity, a beast to be tamed and sold for labor. They want to break his spirit, to use him for work, just like they've done with so many other wild horses in the past. She stands frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do. Her body trembles as panic rises within her chest. She can't let them take him, not after everything they've been through together. Storm has become a part of her life, her one source of solace in a world that's so often cruel. Nina knows that if they succeed in capturing him, Storm's freedom, the very thing that made him so special, will be taken away forever. The idea of him being shackled, forced to work until he's broken and tired, tears at her heart. The freedom she's always longed for will be snatched from both of them. And in that moment, she realizes how much he truly means to her. More than just an animal, but a symbol of her own survival and hope. Without thinking, she runs toward the pen, shouting at the men to stop. Her voice is filled with desperation. "Please, don't take him," she pleads, but the traders ignore her, laughing at her futile attempt to stop them. The wild horse, sensing the danger, rears up in fear. Nina's heart races. She knows she has to do something, but what? Despite Nina's desperate attempts to stop them, the traders succeed. They capture Storm and begin to lead him away, dragging him forcefully toward a cart. Nina watches, her heart shattering as the horse struggles against the ropes. Storm's wild spirit, the very thing that made him so special, is now being subdued by the harsh reality of the world around him. Nina races toward them, her voice trembling with anguish. "Please, he's not just an animal. He's free. You can't take him." But the men brush her off as if she's nothing. One of the traders sneers at her, telling her to move aside. "This horse is mine now," he says coldly, "and there's nothing you can do about it." The sound of Storm's hooves clattering against the stone path echoes in Nina's ears as he's dragged away. She falls to her knees in the dirt, the weight of the moment crashing down on her. Her eyes fill with tears as she watches the last remnants of their bond being torn apart. She wanted to believe that the bond they shared was strong enough to withstand anything, but now, she feels powerless. It's as if a piece of her own soul has been taken from her. The world that once felt a little more bearable because of Storm's presence now feels darker and colder. The small victories they shared, the trust, the tenderness, all seem like distant memories, swept away by the cruelty of the world. Nina stands up, her legs weak beneath her. She watches helplessly as the traders load Storm into the cart, and she realizes with crushing certainty that she may never see him again. This moment marks a heartbreaking loss for her. A loss not just of the horse she had come to love, but also of the dream she had built. The dream of freedom, for both herself and for Storm. As the cart disappears into the distance, Nina collapses on the ground. She cries for him, for herself, for everything that was taken from them both. Her heart feels heavy with grief, and she wonders if she will ever be able to heal from this pain. Days pass, and Nina can't shake the image of Storm's fearful eyes as he was taken away from her. She spends each day in silence, her heart aching with the memory of the horse she had come to love and the bond they shared. She wonders where he is, if he's okay, if he's suffering. Every passing day feels like a piece of her soul is being chipped away. One evening, As Nina sits in the dark corner of the alley where she often sleeps, she overhears a conversation between two men. One of them speaks with a tone of finality. "The horse is going to a man who plans to break him," the man says. "He's going to use the animal for hard labor. Work until he can no longer stand." Nina's heart races. She knows exactly what this means. The traders weren't just selling Storm to anyone. They were selling him to someone who would treat him with cruelty, forcing him into a life of endless toil. The very freedom Storm had once known, the thing that made him wild and untamed, would be stolen forever. Nina cannot bear the thought of it. The pain she feels now is like a deep wound that refuses to heal. But something stirs within her. A flicker of hope, an ember that refuses to die. She knows she can't let this happen. She must do something, even if it means sacrificing everything. The next morning, Nina visits the market where the traders are selling Storm. Her heart pounds in her chest as she approaches the busy crowd, hoping to catch a glimpse of the horse. Finally, she sees him, Storm, tethered to a post, looking worn and tired. He's no longer the wild, free horse she first met. His spirit has been broken, his eyes dulled with fear. Nina feels a deep, desperate urge to save him. But there's one problem. She has no money. She's a beggar, with nothing to her name except a few scraps of change she's managed to collect over the past few weeks. And yet, as she looks at Storm, she knows she can't let him live this fate. Without hesitation, Nina makes the decision that will change everything. She walks up to the trader, her hands trembling. She looks at him with determination, though the fear in her heart threatens to overwhelm her. She asks the trader how much he wants for Storm, hoping against hope that the price isn't too high. The trader gives her a cold look. "You think you can afford him?" he sneers. "This horse is worth more than you'll ever have in your life." Nina stands tall, her resolve strengthening with every word. She looks at the trader with fire in her eyes. "I'll give you everything I have," she says. "Every coin I've earned." The trader scoffs, clearly unimpressed. But Nina doesn't back down. She hands him every coin she has, every last bit of her money. It's a pittance compared to what Storm is truly worth, but it's all she can offer. She feels a pang of fear as she waits for the trader's response. But deep down, she knows she can't turn back now. The trader eyes her for a moment, then grunts and nods. "You've got yourself a deal," he says. In that instant, Nina's heart lifts. She has done it. She has saved Storm from a life of misery, and she is willing to sacrifice everything to do so. With Storm free, Nina leads him away from the market, her heart soaring. But as she walks, she begins to realize the bitter truth. While she has saved Storm from the immediate threat of cruelty, there's no way she can offer him the kind of life he deserves. She has no home, no land, no means to take care of him. She's a beggar, living day by day. She knows that keeping Storm with her would be selfish. He needs freedom, a life beyond the constraints of human society, beyond the cruel reality of her world. Nina finds a quiet spot outside the city, a wide open field with tall grass swaying in the breeze. She stops and looks at Storm, her heart breaking. She reaches out to touch him one last time, feeling the warmth of his body beneath her fingertips. She whispers to him, her voice choked with emotion. "You're free now, Storm. You don't need me anymore." For a moment, she stands still, looking into his eyes. She knows this is the hardest thing she has ever done. But she also knows it's the right thing. Storm deserves to be free, to live without fear or restraint. With a final, tearful goodbye, Nina releases Storm into the wild. She watches as he runs, his powerful legs carrying him across the open land. She knows he will find his way, and though it tears her apart, she understands that this is his true destiny. Not by her side, but out in the world, where he belongs. As Nina watches him disappear into the distance, her heart aches with loss. But there's also a sense of peace. She has given him the one thing she can't give herself, the freedom to live on his own terms. And in that, there is a kind of love that transcends all else. Nina walks away, her head held high, despite the tears that still fall. She has made the ultimate sacrifice for the horse she loves. And though it's heartbreaking, She knows that it's an act of pure, unconditional love. Months pass since Nina made the heartbreaking decision to let Storm go. The days have grown longer, the seasons have shifted, and Nina's life has continued, though there's an undeniable emptiness in her heart. She's back on the streets, begging for the little scraps of life that others can spare. Yet, deep down, she knows something profound has changed within her. The love she gave to Storm, the love that was pure, selfless, and transformative, has taught her the value of sacrifice, compassion, and the deep connection that can exist between humans and animals. One cold morning, as she huddles against a wall in a quiet corner of the city, a familiar sound catches her ear, the sound of hooves pounding against the ground. Her heart leaps in her chest as she turns toward the sound, unsure if her mind is playing tricks on her. There, in the distance, is a horse, a strong, beautiful creature with a familiar gait. Her breath catches in her throat. It's Storm. The horse approaches her, steady and calm, his coat shining with health. He stops in front of her, as though he's recognized her from the first moment he saw her. Nina stretches out her hand, trembling, as he nudges her gently with his nose. She cannot believe her eyes. Storm has returned. In that moment, Nina's heart fills with an overwhelming wave of emotion. There's no need for words. They understand each other without speaking. Nina reaches up to touch Storm's mane, the familiar texture of his coat, bringing back memories of their time together. It's as if no time has passed at all. They share a quiet, poignant moment of connection, one that speaks louder than any words could ever say. The camera lingers on their reunion, Nina's tear-streaked face as she gazes into Storm's trusting eyes, and the horse's gentle nudge, the kind of touch only a deep bond can inspire. The sound of soft wind blowing through the trees fills the air, as the two of them stand together, united in a bond that transcends everything else. The shot fades to black, leaving the viewer with a sense of hope, but also a deep sense of bittersweetness. Though Nina's journey with Storm is marked by sacrifice and heartache, their story is one of profound transformation. Nina found hope and purpose in her love for him, and in return, Storm found freedom, not just from the physical constraints of the world, but from the emotional walls that had once trapped him. Their bond, though tested by time and circumstance, has proven to be unbreakable. Love, in its most pure and selfless form, can create connections that are far stronger than anything life can throw at us. As Nina and Storm stand together, the message is clear. Even in the darkest moments, when all seems lost, hope can still emerge from the ashes. True love is not just about possession or control. It's about setting someone or something free and allowing them to find their own path. Sometimes, in letting go, we find the greatest bond of all. The moral of this story lies in the transformative power of selfless love and sacrifice. Nina's journey with Storm teaches us that even in the face of adversity, love has the power to heal, to free, and to change lives. Through their connection, we are reminded that true strength lies in compassion, and that sometimes the most heartbreaking choices lead to the most profound forms of love. The story of Nina and Storm also shows us that hope isn't something that can be given to us. It's something we create, something we build, step by step, even when the world seems against us. And no matter the struggles, the sacrifices, or the pain we endure, the hope we carry with us can endure, just like the bond between Nina and Storm. Ultimately, the story teaches us that love is the key to freedom, not only for the ones we care for but for ourselves as well. The love Nina gave to Storm allowed both of them to be free from fear, from pain, and from the limitations of their worlds.